Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the JWJ podcast. This episode is going to be a little different than the ones that we've done so far. Hoop heads and just, the world in general, if you've been paying attention, you've seen that a little over 24 hours ago, we got some pretty hurtful news. Bill Russell, 11-time NBA champion as a player and coach, arguably the greatest Boston Celtic ever, and just an all-around wonderful human being that helped champion the rights of equality, civil rights, human rights in general. Bill Russell passed away on July 31st of 2022. We're going to take this episode just to try to shine a light. Of course, a lot of it's been done already, but we just want to give a little bit of our perspective as basketball fans and honestly as Black men, just how we feel about Bill Russell, what he's meant to our lives, and just what we believe his legacy is going to mean moving forward. So before we get into our main discussion, I do need to make sure that I introduce my guy over here, my shooter on the wing, Mr. Always in the corner. Shane, how you feeling today, bro?
And feeling good, but it's bittersweet, man. It was sad to get that news at this point yesterday. Now we're recording this on Monday, so yeah, I'm we were actually on the phone when the news came down, so that's
Right.
it's tough, but I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, man, it's crazy how it went down. I feel like so often between the two of us, whenever stuff like this comes down, it almost seems like we're always already talking to each other. So it's I don't know, man. It's wild. But this one, it's crazy to think about because on one hand, if we're being realistic, Bill Russell was 88 years old. He lived a long life. He lived a very prosperous life, a full life. But at the same time, there's just certain deaths, certain people passing that you think you'll be ready for it, and then when it happens, you have to sit back and process because honestly, I don't know about you, but for me right now, it still doesn't feel real.
Yeah, it doesn't, man. It just we talked about it. I mean, Bill Russell was kind of those people. They always seem kind of omnipresent. Like they
Mhm.
and we've had people in our own lives, man, that they just they live their life in such a way where it's like they're always around, like they're always
Mhm.
there, and it feels like they'll never pass away. Bill Russell just seemed like that person that would always be around, like whenever the NBA finals would come around, like you'd see him around that time. So yeah, he always seemed omnipresent. And so to know that he's passed on is that's kind of weird to hear and weird to take.
Yeah, it's tough, bro. Um, I do have to mention before we get into it, I told you, one of the first people's opinions that I needed as soon as this went down, I texted my dad. And I just wanted to know what he thought, what he would say, because as long as we've been watching hoops together, my dad has always been a diehard Spurs fan. He's very much a Popovich guy. He loves the system that they work within, and so I texted my dad, and couple of funny things. So I texted him and he immediately texted back, and it was only a 2-word response. My dad texted back. He's usually very concise with his responses. So he texted back and all he said was class act. He's always been a fan of the movement, just fair treatment, equal rights. I mean, really, who shouldn't be a fan? But it's just hearing a parent, hearing one of your parents say something like that. It felt good. And the second funny thing that I got to throw out there, it slipped my mind, and I know I had seen this before, but just doing a little bit of research earlier today, it hit me again. Bill Russell and my dad have the same birthday.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
February, of course, not the same year. My dad is younger, but yeah, February 12th, man.
That's
I
insane.
it totally slipped my mind, and I once I saw it, it hit me again, and I was like, I remember like my dad reminding me about that at one point. It was probably like 20 years ago, but he made it a point to mention. He was like, "Yeah, February 12th," and it all came back when I saw that online earlier. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think it's cool to get to. It's cool that your dad, you know, being at the age he is, it's cool to see what people that are closer to Russell, you know, older black people, like
Mm-hmm.
what they think of Bill Russell, because we talked about this on the phone. Like it's one of those things where we pick it up because I mean we're around the same age. I'm 34, you're 37. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're looking at this like, man, like we kind of have a gist of like what Russell meant, and we have a
Right,
respect and appreciation. But like to look at somebody that's 70, you know, in their 70s,
right.
like their perspective is going to be a lot more what's the word, visceral.
Yeah.
Like you'll like they can connect with that more because of what people that are up in age like that went through around that time. Like
Mm-hmm.
Russell was what he played from age 23 to 34, but he was playing like in the 50s and the 60s when, you
Mm-hmm.
know, by the time he was done, I mean, we're talking a few years after the Civil Rights Act was passed.
Right.
And it's like he and playing in Boston no less. And we've heard plenty of stories about, you know, the racism and
Oh yeah.
all the crap he had to deal with there. So
Oh yeah.
it's to get an older person's perspective, somebody closer to Russell in age. I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
super important for the conversation we're about to have.
Definitely. And I mean, and honestly, for you listeners out there, it 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 sucks to lose a player of his magnitude. And we're going to take, the next few minutes just to, like I said, shine some light on what he meant to the game of basketball. But if we zip through it, my apologies in advance, because I really want to touch on what Shane just said. I want to talk more about what Bill Russell went through, not as a ball player, but as a human being, and how necessary he felt it to try to make sure that generations after his did not have to go through the same thing.
Yeah, and you know, it that level of it takes a certain type of person, and I mean we talked about that as well. It takes a certain type of person to come up in the times that Russell came up in. Your dad, my great aunt that raised me, like
Mm-hmm.
those they're built different. You know, that's
Yeah.
just it.
Yeah.
We hit that thrown around a lot, but those people were built different. Like they went through, they had a lot of tough conversations and put their
Mm-hmm.
life on the line. Um, you know, my great aunt was a freedom rider.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she went from, I mean, she grew up in Arkansas City, Arkansas,
Yeah.
and around Mississippi, and she went from Mississippi, from Arkansas City, like from those areas. She went up to Chicago and lived up there, you know, and you know, her whole, you know, just how she lived her life is just different. You know, I hate that she passed before I could really pick her brain about, you know, those type of
Yeah.
things, because like the level of activism, like freedom rides, sit-ins, like that that level of commitment to trying to make a change and putting your life on the
Mm.
line, where it's you're not thinking of yourself in that manner. You know,
Right.
like your presence and your dignity, everything is focused toward you want better. And you know, and I think the reason that that conversation is important is because a lot of the things that we're starting to see over the last few years, especially probably since a few years ago, once Donald Trump was elected, like we started to see a lot of the ugliness really start to come out
Yeah.
once he got into office.
A lack of discretion.
Yeah,
It's
and it's just like you start to see it. I mean, people joke all the time, like, man, like we sat here and went through this election and we woke up and it was 1950,
Right,
like,
right. Everybody
and
turn your
that
clocks back.
yeah, like it's just like, man, like it's crazy that you're starting to see more things, police brutality,
Mhm.
discrimination, people saying crazy stuff all the time, people hate crimes, shootings, like you name it, it's happening. And it's like
Mhm.
it's almost like it's like a modern version of 1950 that's starting to come back. And
Yeah.
it's kind of scary because if you think about it, you know, there are people that are protesting. There are people on the front lines of this thing, but you know, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's necessarily being publicized, but there are some people on the front lines. But I think in general, I think it's more of the movements now are to get more people to speak up and take a stand, as opposed to when Russell was coming up and my aunt and your dad, like they didn't have a choice. It's like it feels like we have a choice, and
Mhm.
I think that's the importance when you think about Russell's legacy as we move forward is we have a choice and we have a voice as well. And like those things are important. And when you think about how do we make progress going forward, how do we take what Russell and other athletes, of his time dedicated their lives to away from the game to not only make it better for future generations of athletes, but for regular people. Like you don't get to march with Dr. King and you're next to Muhammad Ali and all these people that are prominent figures, not only in the Black community but historically, without thinking about the future generations. And so Bill Russell, I talked about this yesterday when I made my kind of tribute post to him on social media. Man, it was just an immensely important figure, not only in basketball but in life when it comes to activism and what it means to be an athlete in this day, in that day and age, and now when you think about the
Mhm.
people that are speaking up now.
Yeah, it's going back to what you said. It reminds me of, I think it was maybe like 5, 6 years ago. Will Smith was quoted as saying, "Racism isn't getting worse; it's just getting filmed."
Yep.
And when you, just like you said, you mentioned, your aunt, my dad, like it's we read books. They woke up. It was
Yeah.
literally outside of their door. So you said, your great aunt, growing up in Arkansas, like, you know my dad is, born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Born in Alabama in the 1950s. We'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So I mean, it's like you said, it's for lack of a better phrase, a different world.
It really is.
It's something that, they went through so much, and it's like, as crazy as things are that we see now, I can only imagine what they went through that wasn't recorded, that wasn't seen. And I'll actually use that as a quick segue into just a little bit about, you know uh Bill Russell's upbringing. Just a few things that I found. It's interesting that you mentioned, that he he had to, he was steadfast in his ways. He was unwavering. And I think the ironic thing about that is, even Bill knew when to pick and choose, because I say that to say, funny thing about, the basketball side of his life. One of the most interesting things that I saw was, of course, for the listeners that might not have been aware, 1934, Bill Russell was born in Louisiana. And, both of his parents saw their fair share of, racial injustice and unfair treatment. Eventually, with the Great Migration, his family uprooted and moved to Oakland, California. So he spent the rest of his childhood, his teenage years in Oakland. And here's one for you, Shane. I'm sure you were probably pretty aware, so this is probably more for the fans. Did you know that almost on some like Michael Jordan type stuff, Bill Russell was actually cut from his junior high basketball team?
See, and that just goes to show you that you know
one of the greatest stories ever written almost didn't make it past the intro. He was cut from his junior high basketball team. And here's the funny thing. He almost did not make the team in high school either. Now, from what I read, he was almost cut from the team in high school as well, but his coach, even though he said that Bill's fundamentals were awful, his footwork was awful. He said the reason he kept him on the team was because of his tenacity, because he saw that there was this natural ability, this natural desire to want to be better. So it's interesting that that's what kept him around on the court and in life.
being
And
6'10" helps too.
that whole thing, what was 7'4" wingspan,
Yeah.
those little things. And we'll
Can't
put
you
we'll
can't teach that, as they say, right?
yeah, we'll put little in, the biggest air quotes possible. um so next funny thing. So we know that we know that Bill ended up going to the University of San Francisco. Two-time national champ there. He was the most outstanding player of the tournament in 1955. Stat wise, this man averaged 20 points, 20 boards a game over the span of this tournament. Now, next funny thing that I got to throw out there about that. Do you know that USF is the only school that recruited him?
See, this is what I'm talking about. Like that is astounding. But we see plenty of this where we've
Right.
seen plenty of great players only get one Division 1 offer from whatever school. Steve Nash only got Santa Clara.
Santa
Steph Curry
Clara.
only got like Davidson.
Right.
So yeah, it happened back then too.
Mhm. And while we're on the whole, again talking about adapting and this and that, even Bill still knew when to pick and choose his moments, because here's another funny one for you. While he played in high school, do you know what one of the main things was that his coach told him to do on defense?
What?
He told him that he wanted him to play flat-footed defense. He did not want Bill leaving his feet. He did not want Bill moving around a lot. He basically just wanted him to be a big body and just be in the way. But,
Just put your
Bill,
hands up.
right, just put your hands up. And Bill said himself, he was like, that's nah. And eventually, they followed suit. And Bill became, what we can now appreciate as one of the greatest defensive big men in the history of the game.
The greatest.
Yeah.
I'm going that far. The
Yeah.
greatest defensive big man ever.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's a quick little like aside with that. Like, if you go back and look at the clips of Bill Russell, I mean, this dude was literally jumping over people. He was jumping. We've seen the picture now where he's jumping over one guy to pin somebody's ball to the glass. Like,
That man was horizontal.
yeah, he was literally horizontal. His chest was facing the floor when he's
Yeah.
blocking this shot. Like, people, we talk all the time about people who would fit in today's NBA. Like, we talk about, oh, could Wilt play, or Shaq, or Pete Maravich, or even closer people to this era like Dirk and KG and Rasheed Wallace and like all these guys. And they talk about offense.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see I would have loved to see a player like Bill Russell in today's NBA.
Oh yeah,
A guy that controlled the game. He scored 15 points a game for his career, but he averaged 22 and a half rebounds.
right.
And he played in the era before they even logged block shots. He probably
Oh, and
averaged
not
6 or 7 blocks a game.
not to mention a career playoff average of around 24.9
Yeah.
boards per game.
And see, that's the
A
thing, though.
record that I don't think will ever be broken.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was doing this, and he was a big body in terms of height, but he wasn't like a heavy guy.
He was Durant.
215 pounds at
Yeah.
6'10, but he had that defensive mentality. I would love to
Mhm.
see a player like Bill Russell playing today, because everybody talks about how nobody plays defense. I guarantee
Mhm.
if Bill Russell played today, he would revolutionize how defense is played in this day and age, because everybody talks about how nobody plays defense now. Bill Russell in today's NBA would be an absolute monster.
Biggest injustice that I can think of off the top of my head is that it wasn't until 1983 that the first Defensive Player of the Year award was given out in the NBA.
Crazy.
Such a disappointment. Can you imagine the way that Bill Russell would have cleaned house?
Yeah,
Man,
there's a reason. There's a reason that we're talking about, like, when we talk about Bill Russell and those 11 championships in 13 seasons and 8 straight, right?
8 straight.
He played with, at the time, the most prolific offensive big guy and the most complete offensive big guy in Wilt
Mm-hmm.
Chamberlain. He was the
Mm-hmm.
one that was the gatekeeper, not Wilt
Yeah.
Chamberlain. Russell
Because yeah,
was the gatekeeper in that time. He was the one winning the titles, the greatest
team,
winner in the history of the game.
and it's not even close.
It's not even close. No, I don't think anybody, and I don't care what super team you got. I don't care who's on what team. Ain't
Yeah.
nobody. Yeah, I said ain't
That's it. That'll work.
nobody going out there and winning 8 straight titles. That's not going to happen.
Absolutely not.
It's bad enough. It's hard enough to win 2 in a row. It's hard enough to win 3 in a row. Shout out to the Lakers, 3 peats.
Man.
It's hard to win one title. Then you go out and say, okay, we're just gonna win 8 straight, and in 11 and 13 years. That's dynastic. Everybody talks about the whole Jordan 6 for 6 and this and that, but I mean, it wasn't 6 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple retirements in there.
Right.
So, like Russell, those are records I don't think will ever be touched. I mean, granted, I thought, Kareem's was untouchable. I thought nobody would ever get to 38,000 points. And LeBron, all he has to do is average 16 next season, and he'll have that record. Like, I
Right.
don't think, as far as team success, I don't think any team will ever win 11 titles in 13 seasons,
And
nor will
I
they win 8 straight. I just don't think that's going to be touched.
and I think it's worth mentioning, we talk about, we talk about the three peats that we saw from, the Lakers, from the Bulls. We see how a dynasty like the Spurs has carried, over the last 2-3 decades.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning that the league, when Bill Russell was doing this, was so much more condensed. So we're doing this over 8 teams. We're not doing this with 30 where 12 of them are pushovers.
Yeah.
Like this is a league where you never really knew who was coming out. So it's just that much more impressive. It's basically like, and I mean, of course, it's not the same equivalent, but it's like, like a few years ago when we were playing in the league at the church. I mean, it's only 8-10 teams there.
Yeah.
So if you're going up against these same people all the time and it's much more condensed, you're looking at 5, 6, 7 purely talented individuals on a roster, as opposed to 16, 18 teams where there might be one star and a bunch of guys that just fill in gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everybody talks about like that era of player. Like, there were fewer teams, but you think about who played in the 60s. I mean, he played the middle of the 50s into the 60s. So you're talking, he played against Wilt Chamberlain. He played against Jerry West.
Pettit.
Bob Pettit. A lot of the great players were on his team. I mean,
Right.
he
Right.
played with Kuzi and all those dudes. Like the there's a reason that the Celtics, far and away have the most retired jerseys in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're gonna get to the point they're gonna start using letters for names after a while. Like
We have a personal foul holding Green Q. 2 shots.
it's a foul. It's a foul on QXL. 2 shots.
For real.
They can't
Look,
retire all the numbers, but man,
funny. So it's funny while we're talking about the whole, the condensed league and everything. So we go and we look at 56 after what he did in college. Like I said, 2-time champ in college. He's drafted, and I'm not gonna lie, the novice in me was not fully aware of this right away. I did not know that Bill Russell was not actually drafted by Boston.
yeah, I didn't know
Uh,
that either.
yeah, he was actually drafted by the St. Louis Hawks, and the Hawks reached out to Red Auerbach because they were interested in Celtic Ed Macauley.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Macauley was originally from the St. Louis area. And because of that, I think there were some personal things going on with his family and what have you. So the Hawks were trying to help him out, and they wanted to get him closer to home. So they were willing to give up Bill Russell in order to get Ed Macauley to St. Louis. Now, in order to sweeten the deal, um, it also ended up to where Boston also had to give up Cliff Hagan.
Mm-hmm.
So you had, it was a 2-for-1 swap. But the funniest thing about it, he's drafted in 56. Bill Russell actually didn't play until December of that year because of previous Olympic commitments. But they make the finals that year. They win the finals. And do you know who they beat?
Go ahead.
They beat the same team that just gave him up. And
See?
for his first ring, they beat the St. Louis Hawks. They
Yeah. You see how close. You see how close the Hawks were to being like
listen.
they were that close. They were literally that close.
Listen.
Man,
So
like who would have thought? Who would have thought
right.
that Atlanta was screwing it up even then,
Hey,
even when they were in
not
St.
hey,
Louis?
not me. so, no, so I mean, I feel like the rest is written in history. I mean, the numbers don't lie. I mean, shout out to Sheed. Now numbers don't lie, man. 11-time champ, like we said, 8 consecutive, excuse me. Um, 2 as a player coach. And the funniest thing was, he became the first, black head coach in North American pro sports. Once
There's a
once
reason
Red,
he's a two-time Hall of Famer.
yeah, once Red stepped down, and another thing that I didn't realize was that Bill Russell actually wasn't the first choice. Red had a list of about 3 or 4 guys, and a lot of them turned it down. And I believe it was I'm pretty sure on it. I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe it was Heinsohn that Red came to him and asked him, and Heinsohn wasn't really feeling it, and he actually recommended. He was like, "Why not Bill?" So, like I said, the rest is history. I mean, he stepped in, did what he had to do, and boom.
Yeah, and I mean, given his success as a player, it's especially how he went about his business. I mean, this is a guy that most athletic and played with immense passion,
Mhm.
like that. Those kind of guys, man. Especially, you get them in a coaching setting. People are gonna listen to him. People are gonna listen to a guy like that because all he's done is win. He produced. Like you it doesn't take much to trust that guy. Not granted, again, in the time they lived in, there's plenty of reasons why that Russell wasn't the first choice, obviously.
Mhm.
But, Red ultimately did the right thing.
Right. and it turned out quite well. um, so while we're on, I mean, I definitely want to go ahead and work our way over into uh what Bill brought to the game beyond playing, beyond coaching. And, just I want to look at it more from an activism standpoint and just what he did to advocate for, later generations of players, because I think that's a very big point that we have to touch on as well. I do want to give you one more funny story that I actually heard on the radio when I was driving to work this morning. So, 9 times out of 10, if I'm in the car, I'm listening to NBA radio. So, especially now that my radio is acting normal again, shout out to that. So if you guys don't know what we're talking about, make sure you go listen to the rest of our episodes. That is the JWJ podcast. We love you.
We're on
So
YouTube now too, by the way.
let's get it. So I'm on the way to work this morning, and I can't remember who was interviewing him. I think it was Frank Isola. But anyway, they bring on a photographer, Nathaniel. They call him Nat. Bring on Nat Butler, and he has been, working in photography for the league for decades. He's been doing this forever. So he sits down because I'm sure everybody has seen the picture floating around social media. And if you're a fan of the game, if you're an historian, then you have seen this picture as well. Imagine a green background with Bill Russell sitting here with his face in his hands, smiling, with 11 rings on his fingers. You know the picture that I'm talking about. And I'm going to tell you guys when we go ahead and make our IG post about this episode, because it is coming, I'm probably going to use that picture because it might be my all-time favorite picture of Bill Russell. But I say all that to say this. Butler is the one that took that picture. So apparently he took it during the weekend when they were announcing the 50th anniversary team. So he took the picture in 1996, and they're asking questions, how did this picture come about, this, that, whatever. Next very interesting thing that I learned that totally threw me. Butler tells the listeners that I think only one of the rings on Bill Russell's hands was actually his. Reason being, apparently it was league standard back then to where if you were a repeat champion, you didn't get another ring for winning again. So at the time, they were implying that Bill Russell only had like one ring. So they were like, if you pay close attention to like shadows and things that we did with the picture, we ran around to as many of his teammates as we could to get their rings. So they said literally most of those rings in that picture did not even belong to Bill Russell. We just knew that we needed to have 11 of them on his hand.
See, and that's a hell of a story. That is a hell of a story. Like, that's incredible. That's my first time hearing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I never knew that. And I was like, that is insane. I was like, but like I said, funny story. Like I was in the car cracking up. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And like Butler is sitting here and he's like, man, can you imagine how I'm feeling at that point? He's like, I am freaking out because I'm getting rings from all of these Celtic legends. And all I can think to myself is, oh God, I hope I do not lose any of these. So he's like, I'm sitting here. I'm like, look, we got to get this going. We got to get this going. We just got to do it. So, and he said that one of the ideas that he had for one of the pictures was he wanted Bill. So, there's the one where he has the hands on the face. And then there's the other one where he's sitting there with them all like cupped in his hands and he's just looking up at the camera. Butler said there was a third option. And the third one that he wanted to do was he was actually going to have Bill wearing the first 10 on his hand. And then number 11, he was going to be smiling at the camera with number 11 in his teeth. and he said that I threw the idea by Bill, and Bill was like, nah, I don't like that. I don't like that. And he was like, and Isola was like, so that was it? And Butler was like, if you knew Bill, Yeah, that was it. That was it. So it didn't happen. He was like, you didn't argue with Bill Russell, so that idea never came to fruition. That one didn't happen.
Yeah, you're not going to win that argument. I think there'd be some type of window he would throw you through if you pushed him hard enough with it. So
with the deadpan stare.
yeah, he'd probably throw you through the window, and then you'd hear that cackle from the end of the hallway. So
Oh
this
man.
is we talk about this all the time when people pass, man. It's sad, but it's cool to sit around and talk about it and the things we find out and the things we learn and
Yeah.
how much this person meant, to celebrate, what Bill Russell meant, man. Even though hearing the news of his passing was sad, man, it's just really cool to talk about, his legacy and what he's meant. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about earlier in this pod about, what the legacy is as far as today's climate, today's political climate.
Yeah.
We have so many social issues going on. Racism is still alive and well. We still
Mm-hmm.
have, inequality. We just had the overturning of Roe v. Wade. We just had like all these different things. We still have the issues of gun violence and
Yeah.
assault weapons and school shootings and just there's so many things in this world right now,
And it's only getting worse.
and it's only getting worse. I mean, we hear about issues with police brutality and people being gunned down needlessly in the streets just because they were speeding or they ran a stop sign. Like, people shouldn't be dying for that.
Right.
And we have so many people. I mean, obviously people now are kind of more selective, um as far as the things they fight for. I mean, look at Maya Moore. She's a perfect example of somebody that sacrificed her career for something that she believed strongly in.
Mm-hmm.
She's married to the person that she help free, and she fought for his release. um you have people all across sports.
Colin Kaepernick.
We had obviously Colin Kaepernick. I mean, his was a hot button issue.
Yeah.
Kneeling for the flag to bring attention to the injustices that happen in our country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Naomi Osaka, even in tennis, she wore masks
Mm-hmm.
when the pandemic was going on. She
Right.
wanted to bring greater attention to the
And
police brutality and victims.
every mask had a message. That's what I loved it.
Yeah, and not only that, but there's other things as far as those social issues. When we think about athletes, mental health, Naomi
Mm-hmm.
Osaka has been an advocate of that. When you look
Mm-hmm.
at Serena Williams in tennis, she's advocated for women and body positivity, things like that. You
Yeah.
look at guys in the NBA. I mean, look at LeBron James. He's probably at the forefront of people that they've done things to raise awareness for things, bring attention to things, give their opinion on things because their opinion matters.
Mm-hmm.
He's opened schools, for in communities that need them. He's
Right.
put his money where his mouth is in a lot of issues.
Right.
He's probably spoken out on some things that maybe he wasn't completely informed about, the whole China situation. But you want
Mm-hmm.
your athletes,
Have an
everybody.
opinion.
Yeah, like I think it's important that we say that athletes are people.
Yeah.
And we've been, for a long time we were desensitized to think if they're not on the court that they're not human.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, like, if they're not on the court, they're not human. And I think we're seeing more of, we had the whole shut up and dribble
Yep.
BS.
That's right where I was about to
Shout
go.
out to LeBron for putting his money where somebody else's mouth was and copywriting
Absolutely.
that so she can shut the hell up. But um, but I ain't gonna even say her name because y'all know what
No,
I'm talking about. But
not even needed. You
and
don't
so,
get any
like,
publicity off JWJ, Shotty.
yeah, like, she ain't getting no free promo here. She can,
Yeah, dude, do you
yeah,
y'all can use your own, we'll call them Google fingers if that's what you want.
yeah, she can take both feet and kick rocks. So, um, but like the shut up and dribble stuff, for one, it's ignorant, and
Um,
athletes are human. and they have a voice, and people think, oh, you know, they make all this money and blah blah blah. Like that's the thing that you want, because it would be so easy to make all this money and not say a damn thing. But these are people that are willing, like Colin Kaepernick, risked his money, and he hasn't played a game in the NFL since what, 2016?
Yeah, 15 or 16,
Yeah,
one of
so
those.
like, and this is a dude that led the 49ers to a Super
They
Bowl,
went
and
to a
people
Super
want to act
Bowl.
like he was trash.
Right.
He's
Right.
been he's been basically blackballed out of the league. He's been given workouts, which either you're gonna bring him on the team or not. You know, workouts ain't nothing. People go through workouts all the time.
I have
But
one next week,
see, there you go.
and I don't
Like,
even
look at
play
it.
football.
See, there you go. Like, it's so like that. That's not enough.
Yeah.
If y'all really want to do something, if y'all really want to let everybody know that that dude wasn't blackballed, put him on your roster.
Right.
Let him compete for a spot. Just having him in for a workout, he ain't competing for nothing.
Yeah.
So, you
And
know, like,
not
athletes that make all this money, you know, millions of dollars. LeBron, first billionaire.
right.
You know, like these players that have made all this money, like it's important that their opinion matters, because you know, you don't, like, it's so easy to hide behind your money, and it's okay. Not everybody's cut out to be an activist. You know, not every, you know, like, that's just it. Like, not everybody's going to um put themselves out there as a person that's like that, and that's okay. Not everybody's built like that, but kudos to the people that want to get out in the forefront of things and want to affect change in the world, in their lives, in other people's lives. Like, I don't think that can be overstated. And Bill Russell was a champion of that. There's other athletes, you know, Jim Brown and all these other, Muhammad Ali, classic example
Yeah.
of people that were willing to say, to hell with the fame, to hell with this game. If I in Ali's case, I'm not going to Vietnam. Them people ain't
Yeah,
did nothing to me.
and that's it. It's funny. I'm glad you said that, because that is exactly where I was about to go.
Yeah,
So we have our athletes now, like you said, our, you know, the LeBrons, the Kaepernicks. I mean, pretty much everybody in the NBA that you would, you know, throw on that throw on that legendary banana boat. I mean, your
yeah,
Chris Pauls, your Carmelo Anthony, you know, Dwayne Wade, all of those guys. They're, kudos to them, because they are not afraid to speak up and speak out. But I want to point out even more just how valuable someone like Bill Russell is in that regard. Because, like you said, these guys, you know, they've made their money. They're, you know, they've made tons of income, not just from basketball, from endorsements, from all these other things that they could possibly lose. But let's be real. If they lose those things, it'll be made up somewhere else.
yeah.
So they did have something to lose, and this is in no way trying to take away from what they've done. I just want to use it as a comparison from the standpoint of, now we're telling, you know, now they're being told, shut up and dribble, just do your job. Oh, you're an athlete making this kind of money, so just go do your job, and
I
that's
don't want
that. Now
politics in my
let's,
sports.
right. So it's like, so it's like, yeah, you don't want politics in your sports, you don't want religion in your sports, but we still play the anthem before every game. So you you have these guys that are being ostracized or being talked down upon or being bashed on social media. I'm unfollowing you, but I'm going to comment on your post tomorrow to remind you that I'm unfollowing you when I said it last week. So you have all these, you know, these possible repercussions. Let's compare this to Bill Russell. I looked this up as well, and Bill Russell, I feel like it was one of his early salaries. He made around $24,000 a year. Now, in relation to, like, you know, just with the changes in money, it said on a scale comparing that to 2021, it was somewhere in the range of just shy of $250,000. Now, that sounds nice, but let's look at the NBA right now. Rookies make $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And these are rookies that probably like have to get splinters surgically removed from their behinds by the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So to think that this man is doing all of this for what? For what? He's not making the same kind of money. He's pretty much the face of a league that, let's be real, didn't want him, especially playing in a place like Boston, where I can bring you a title and I come home and I'm still not made to be comfortable in the city whose franchise wanted me here and the fans don't. You're fine with this gold trophy that I brought in, but you're not okay with the black skin that put the ball in the basket to get it here.
Mm-hmm.
So Bill Russell, to me, it like I said, just laying that groundwork, laying that foundation. When you bring up Muhammad Ali, he was one of the people on the front line, like you said, along with Jim Brown, along with Kareem, like players that weren't afraid to stand up and say, we stand with Ali. We agree with what he says and we will back him 100%. It You think the NBA wanted that drama, or as the look, I'm gonna show my age and I'm gonna say it. The way the kids say, you think the NBA wanted that smoke? No, they did not want that kind of blemish on their league in the 1960s. Absolutely not. But you know what? Kareem did not care. Bill Russell did not care. And to me, their struggle, their fight was so much more impactful because now, for the sake of political correctness and for the sake of not pissing the wrong people off, eventually the NBA is going to back what you're saying. But back then, far from the same.
Yeah.
So it's if you didn't have people with backbones as strong as a Bill Russell or a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, where would this league be now? Where would we be now? It's almost scary to try to think about it.
Yeah, and there's a common thread here too. When you talk about Ali and Kareem and Bill Russell and Jim Brown, all these people are damn good. They're the greatest.
They're all the
They're
best at
among the
what they do.
greatest in their professions,
Yep.
in their sports.
Yep.
Like that's the platform.
Right.
Not only like it, because here's a comparison, James, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, if you made it this far, we appreciate you. Like a lot of listeners, for every Bill Russell and Muhammad Ali, like those guys have platforms, right? But you have other people like a Kaepernick who even though he made a Super Bowl, wasn't like one of the best quarterbacks in the game necessarily, right? But
Right.
bringing it to the NBA, Craig Hodges, right?
Ooh, they ain't
Like
ready. They ain't ready,
like
Shane.
Craig Hodges was kind of blackballed for his activism and the things he believed in. Look at Mahmoud Abdul Rauf.
Oh, come
Look
on
at
now.
him.
Come on
His
now.
religious,
They
right?
ain't ready.
Like when you think about like these guys, like there's people that have done less but have stood for more, and it cost them everything, right? Like Mahmoud was in the prime of his career. He was Steph Curry before Steph Curry, and
Yeah, man.
like
Yeah.
he when he was Chris Jackson, it was cool, but when he converted to Islam and started praying during the anthem or whatever, they didn't like that,
Literally,
so he didn't end up in the league too much longer.
literally on the same premise as a Kaepernick.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, while we shining light on guys like Russell who had platforms and were all time great players, there's also people that weren't all time greats that stood for the same and used their platform and they got deplatformed because of their beliefs, but they had the courage to step up and speak up for what they believe in, and so that's what Bill Russell stood for. Just an immensely important, impactful person. His impact transcended, what he did on the court. There's a reason that he's got all these things named after him and he's so revered, is because, not only was he was a great player in a time where the NBA wasn't even the most popular sport.
Right.
Like,
Right.
the NBA didn't really take off until the 80s.
Right.
It from 1946 until the end of the 70s, basketball was just this kind of sideshow deal. It
Mm,
started to get a little more popularity in the 70s with the ABA and Pistol Pete and Rick Barry and all them. Then the 80s, that's when you got Bird and Magic. You got two faces to transcend basketball and make it what it is today. Without Bird and Magic, we don't get Jordan, right?
right. Right.
And so, like all those things kind of needed to happen, because without Russell, we don't get, without Russell and all the stuff he went through, like we don't get to the other players. We don't get to Bird and Magic, because you got black and white with
It's
Bird
like
and
you
Magic.
look
You
at
got
it's like
LA and you got Boston.
yeah, it's like you look at and even after the playing days, you look at the discrepancy. So he's brought in as a player coach, first black coach in pro, North American pro sports. You look at it now and we're celebrating the fact that what is it? I think either a quarter or a third of the coaches in the NBA are black at this point.
Yeah. And Bill
We're
Russell was
we're
the
we're
first.
we're celebrating that in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
This man was the first black coach, the only of his kind in this league, and it was not that long ago.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago. Like, to put it into perspective, he like my dad is in his 70s. When Bill Russell was named a player coach, my dad was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
It was not that long ago. So to think that we still have to sit here and celebrate that a quarter of the coaches in the league have hit this milestone, but the league has also expanded. We're at 30 teams now.
Yeah.
Bill Russell was doing this when there were only 8 teams around,
Yeah.
and he was alone. Huge difference.
Yeah.
This man was a pioneer in so many different ways. And the world, not just basketball, the world, period, took a tremendous loss with the passing of Bill Russell.
Yep. And it's one of those things. It's like, we may have lost the man, but his impact, his legacy, his transcendence will forever live on. He's immortal
Absolutely. Yeah.
because he stood for something more than just being on that parquet floor and putting up all those rebounding numbers and winning all those championships. Dude wanted life.
Mhm.
Dude made his presence in the world, no matter in the grand scheme, no matter how small it could be, he in what he did, he lived a life well lived,
Yeah.
because he did it for something bigger than him. And that is the essence of what, a lot of what it takes for activism to hit its mark, is that you need people willing to sacrifice and fight for something bigger than themselves. And we talk about
Yeah.
that all the time with teams. We hear it all the time from coaches. The best teams are the group of guys that
They're selfless.
sacrifice the me for the
Yeah,
we,
that's right.
right? Not just play with each other, but play for each other, right?
Mhm.
And when you take that outside the lines, you really kind of get the scope of what Bill Russell meant, not only to sports but the world. And he'll be sorely missed. And kudos to you, Mr. Russell.
That's my
It's a job well done.
that sacrificing the me for the we. A lot of people don't understand. Coming into the league, Bill Russell was one of the most outstanding offensive big men that the league had ever seen. But he was willing to give that up because he knew what his team needed. Did you realize, Shane, that at no point in his career did he average more than 20 points per game in a season?
See, yeah, and because he had other people, that picked up that slack. There's a reason all those numbers are retired.
Yeah.
That dude. I mean, think about it. Everybody talks about Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman got buckets in college.
Yep.
he got to the
and
NBA and
wanted to when he got to
he
Detroit.
rebounded and played defense. He
he
had a stretch where he went like 4 games with no points, but he had 20 plus rebounds in all 4 games.
Yep.
So, and that's just going back to the on the court stuff. But
Right.
like that selflessness, that willingness to sacrifice between the lines is what ultimately led to his success and him being so legendary outside of that.
Bill Russell, Bill Russell is by far the epitome. One of my favorite hashtags, and Shane, you already know where I'm going. One of my favorite hashtags that I love to use when it comes to certain sports moments or important things that happen. And if you guys don't follow us, we'll get to that because you need to. One of my favorite hashtags that I love to use when it comes to posting sports stuff is more than a game. And Bill Russell is the epitome of that. Everything that he did was for something beyond basketball. That 94 by 50 could not contain that man. His life just meant so much more. And I feel like it's almost even, it's probably selfish of me to say I'm mad that I was never able to be in the same space as this man. I just to even be in the same room, in the same building, I would brag till my dying day about something like that, even if I never got to get within 50 feet of him. It's just I feel like he just commanded that kind of presence, and it was well earned because this man literally sacrificed his life for everything that he loved and everything that he believed was right, everything that he believed was just. So again, just to echo you, man, Mr. Russell, we salute you. We appreciate you. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, if it wasn't for people like you paving the way, where would two black guys like Shane and I be right now? Where would we be? Would we have college degrees right now? Would we be professionals? Where would our lives be if we didn't have people like you that were willing to sacrifice everything for us?
Yeah. And it transcends things. The only black coach at one point in North American sports. Now you look at what in my city, you got the winningest high school football team, Valdosta Wildcats, the winningest high school football team in the nation.
Yeah, man.
They have a black head coach in Shelton Felton.
Let's get
Valdosta
it.
State University.
Oh,
They've
yeah.
won 4 national titles in Division II football.
Blazer Nation, baby.
They hired their 11th head coach in history. It's a black dude for the first time, Tremaine Jackson. So, without Bill Russell, and this is a completely different sport. Without Bill Russell, you don't see eventually a Shelton Felton or Tremaine Jackson. 18 miles from here in Quitman, Georgia, you don't see Maurice Freeman, who just won a state championship last season.
Shout out to Coach Freeman. I love that man.
Yeah, shout out to them. So, that's pretty much all we got for Bill Russell, man. And like I said, job well done for him. He'll be sorely missed. But you guys know the drill. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to the JWJ podcast. We are on YouTube now. You can find us at the JWJ podcast. All 10 of our episodes before this one are already uploaded. If you haven't been jiving with us, you haven't listened, we got all of our episodes there. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, like us on Facebook at the JWJ podcast. If you want to follow me, myself and James personally, you can follow me at It's a Thomas Thing. You can follow me there on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow James in the same spaces at Titletown's Mayor. And we appreciate you guys. We have a special episode coming up. You've been listening to us for a while, and we appreciate you. But we have something special coming up. I don't want to give it away yet.
Negative.
But let's just say if you tune into this episode, you'll have a greater appreciation for why we're doing this. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for listening to JWJ.